Hello, and thank you for joining us today in the new year, 2015, January. It's cold outside in some places, especially over here, and we're going to get started to talk about automating file transfers. If you have any questions or comments, please enter them into the questions box in the GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar box, so I can address them either at the end, or if this is a technical problem, let me know as well, so I can address it during my presentation. A technical problem with regards to the webinar not working, or you not hearing the audio or anything like that. So thank you very much for coming. We are starting the year off talking about how we can automate file transfers and what is things to consider when you want to set up a business, a reliable way of automating file transfers across the globe and between different locations, between your offices. So just a little newsflash here. We just recently came back from Vegas. Actually, I came back on Sunday, and last Thursday night we were accepting an Emmy for our work in accelerated file transfer over the internet. We've done a lot of work with different media companies, and we did coverage for the Olympics, and this is it's a big achievement for our team. And here you can see a few of us accepting the Emmy in Vegas. So my name is John Tkaczewski. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm the president and co-founder of Unlimi-Tech software, the makers of the FileCatalyst products. And if you have any questions regarding file transfer, go check out my blog at filecatalyst.com/blog. It will give you, there's lots of good articles about file transfer, software development, and security, where you can, find new ideas of how you can do things with what you can do with our software, and how you can improve your file transfer processes for your business. So I don't want to really spend too much time. What is file transfer acceleration? We have lots of material of that on our website. I just want to say that the way we accelerate transfer is that we optimize the bandwidth. So this is really a bandwidth optimization tool that allows you to maximize the throughput between two locations. So we'll always be able to provide you the maximum available bandwidth between your 2 points, regardless of your network conditions, and network conditions being packet loss and latency. The way we really do this, we do this via UDP instead of using TCP. We've built our own custom protocol. The protocol is patent pending, and it allows you to maximize the bandwidth regardless of the quality of the link. Of course, the further the 2 points are geographically apart, or the bigger your line, the more you need our software, because this is where you see the biggest acceleration improvement. Here are some examples of what it means in real life. If you want to transfer, this is an example of a 100 megabit line with a 10 gig file with single threaded FTP. Don't forget that you could have multi-threaded FTP, where FTP could be a bit faster, but normally you can see here an improvement of, FTP will take 2.5 hours to transfer a file, and FileCatalyst will take 14 minutes. From LA to London, where you have a much higher RTT, or round trip time, how long it takes the delay on the network, now it takes 12 hours with FTP, and FileCatalyst takes 14 minutes. And by the way, this applies, I'm saying here FTP, but really this applies to all TCP-based protocols, whether you're using HTTP, Windows file sharing, SCP, SFTP, all of this falls under the same umbrella. So if you think of automation, well, it's really a lot of people, when I first talk to them about automating file transfers, they say, well, I'll just set up a cron job using SCP, point it to a folder, and let's say this is an example here that at 6:30 p.m. every day, SCP will transfer some files to some server. Yes, it's a simple approach. It can work in some places, but this is really, I think you're just scratching the surface here of what you're trying to do. And this is what I really want to come up with. It's all the points that you're be looking at to, you got to look at besides of just a cron job and an SCP command. So some of the challenges in automated workflows. Well, first of all is the volume of data. If you're working with, a couple of gigs of files and maybe 200 or 300 files, this can work. But what about if you have thousands of files, or in some cases we actually have clients with millions of files to transfer, so very deep directories, and also the files are very big. Now then this becomes a problem. System notifications. So yes, you can write a script that will email you when its transfers are finished, but once you're getting those email notifications from every server and every transfer, you're going to end up getting something what we call message fatigue. Well, you're going to get so many email messages for your file transfers that you're not going to be really able to pay attention anymore what's good and what's bad. So it's important to figure out how you're going to set up your email notifications. We usually prefer to send them on failures, so it's easier for you to see what's coming in. And then we also have, other tools that allows you to monitor the system properly. System properties. So very often when you're doing these scripts, well, you have to be careful in a system clock. So if your time goes out of whack, you might be transferring in the middle of the day when you have no bandwidth. Another thing you have to look at is your mounts or network drives. So let's say you're mounting a Samba share to a Windows machine. Well, what happens if that network drive goes offline? Well, no transfers will happen. So you have to be careful that way you set it up, that you actually are setting up with using proper paths instead of just mounted drives that could fail on boot up. How do you find errors? Well, if you get an email, you got to go through your script logs. It's not always obvious. This is a problem of how you find problems with your automation transfers. Don't forget, these are automated transfers. If there's an error and you don't fix it, well, they will not be automated anymore. Folder synchronization. Once again, this is something. Do you want to mirror folders? How do you want to mirror folders? Do you want to have a master-slave or a master-master? These are all kind of questions you got to ask yourself. Are you doing any cross-platform transfers? Very often, organizations will be transferring files, let's say, from their Windows file share into a Linux archival box. And this problem is very, very common. Well, you're going to lose your file attributes. So this is something you got to also consider. Transfer speed. Once again, this is something that we work a lot. This is sort of at heart of our technology. It's making sure you get the maximum speed, which you may not be getting with other tools. And verification. Do you need a checksum? Do you need to do an MD5 checksum of the file transfers to deem them successful? Most of the command line tools, free command line tools, will not do a checksum, so you have to actually script something on your own end to do it. So these are the things you gotta think of. I'm gonna try to kind of address them with how we do this with our software, of course, so you have an idea what we do and how we do it. By the way, I see some questions coming in here. I will get to them at the end of my presentation. So we're going to be talking here. We have a number of file transfer products at under the FileCatalyst brand, but the automation really falls under these two tools: the hot folder, or the automated file transfer for transferring watch folders, and the command line. I'm not going to touch base too much on command line because really every option I'm going to be talking in hot folder is available via some kind of a switch in the command line. I'll do a basic transfer just to kind of show you how the syntax looks like, but I'm not going to be really talking too much on the command line side. It's mostly I'm going to be concentrating on the hot folder here. So some interesting features in the hot folder, and not only hot folder but also our command line, that are very good for automation and automated replication of file systems. So there's scheduler, of course, and there's also bandwidth scheduler. So say, during business hours, make the data trickle. After hours, take up all the bandwidth. We have something called file system events, which allows you to, instead of scheduling, you can act on the data as soon as it changes. We have different rules on the data sets, and we have rsync built in. We have monitoring, different ways of monitoring the transfers from hot folders, server, and also we have our central product that allows you to actually see all the transfers at a glance in a web application. We have single archives, so if you're transferring a lot of files, I'll be talking about this in a second, but you can, if you're transferring thousands of files, you can put them into a single archive, transfer one. Cache, MD5, and multi-client. Some of the features here that are interesting for automating. So let's just get right into the demo here. I really didn't want to spend too much time doing PowerPoints, but it's always good to kind of give a background. So as I mentioned, we'll be talking about two products. We're going to be talking about our FileCatalyst Direct Server, and we'll be talking about hot folder. So the server is really the application that everyone connects to either send or receive data from. So here's an example of the FileCatalyst server. I create my users here. With every time I create a user, I can map that user to a specific path on my system. So here, I'll just call this one hot folder. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Set some password on this. And I can, of course, put another name here. This is just a webinar demo. And I can put an email. If there's an email, the email notifications will work. I'm not worrying here about too much this because this is everything I'm doing is local. And here's my home directory. So this is when this user logs in, this is the local path that this user will have access to. I can change this to be a network drive. I can make it, an NFS mount if I'm on Linux. I can I use UNC paths if you're doing any kind of network connectivity via Windows, and you can create your permissions on it. So once this user is created, I have the folder. Now, in many instances, people also need access to other paths for that user without giving them access to the root. So what we have here, we have something called virtual folders. So you can create a folder that will actually be a virtual folder that exists only in that user's home directory that could point to a totally different path. And like this, you can have two users share the same folder, but one, for example, has read and write, and the other one has only read permissions. And you can group these folders and these virtual files and folders into groups. So when you have hundreds of users or thousands of users and hundreds of hot folders, you can just group them and break them by project or by department. So when you're creating a user, it's very nice and quick. You don't have to add them to 30 different hot folders, virtual folders. So once you have this user created here, this user is ready to log in and actually do a transfer. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to now switch to, so here's my hot folder user I created, here's my other user. So I'm just going to go quickly over the command line here so you have an idea how this lot works, but basically it's just a command line where you can specify all your switches. So you just do java.jar, your host, this is my local host, your password, whether you want to do an upload or a download, which file you want to upload, and you can specify the target bandwidth. What's the maximal bandwidth you want it to go? Every other option I'm going to be talking about here is also going to be available in command line and hot folder. So it's just a matter of passing on more of these switches here to get the transfer. And here's my transfer going. The transfer finished. So it was very quick. If I can do this one more time here, I can actually look at my session information. So you can see here appearing this transfer on the server. So you can see all your sessions are always available and visible to you as the administrator from the server side. So that's another way you can monitor your transfers. So that's the command line side. I'm gonna now flip back to our hot folder, so the remote location where you can actually gonna do all your automation. So the hot folder has really three things you got to do. You got to create a site. So which site you want to connect to. So don't remember, this has to be a FileCatalyst server. But keep in mind that you could have multiple sites, ones for pointing to the same server, just with a different username, and that will allow you to, let's say, map to different directories or create different workflows for different use cases. In this case here, I only have one site for demo purposes, which is local and is pointing to that user that I created on the server. Hot folders. So these are locations, local for the hot folder running. Once again, here I'm just on the C drive, but this could be UNC paths, this could be map network drives, NFS mounts. It doesn't matter. You can create whatever you want here for these. And then a scheduler. So scheduler you pick a site and you pick a hot folder and you decide what to do with it. So here's one I created for uploads. So you can see here I called the task upload. I picked my hot folder test. I selected my site and I uploaded. Now if I had multiple sites or pointing to the same server but different usernames, then I could have a totally different paths or different results from this. But here's an idea how you can do this with a simple upload, and you can switch it to upload or a download, whatever you want to do. And as I mentioned, this is an automation webinar, so I just want to go through some of the scheduling options here you have. So you can pretty much do everything you can do in a cron plus more. So here's an example if you want to do it every minute, or if you want to do it, schedule it on, let's say, every Monday at midnight. You can make these changes. You can also make it go every second if you want. Another interesting option here, which I'll talk a little bit later on, it's the always on file system events. So hot folder can actually register with the operating system file system events, and if there are any changes to a deep directory, instead of scanning that directory, it can just perform the action immediately. So this gives you kind of almost real-time syncing of your folders without being depending on a schedule. I'll talk about this option a bit later on in the webinar. Connection. These are the options here. What do you want to do? UDP, you want to auto detect, you want to do a parallel TCP. So parallel TCP would be like a FTP multiple stream, or you can use our UDP protocol. You can specify the bandwidth, like how aggressive you want us to be with your bandwidth. So our goal is always to make sure that all the TCP-based connections still can go through while we're doing a transfer. Our goal is to make those TCP connections slow, but not kill them. The reason we want to make them slow is that we want to recover the bandwidth and actually for the file transfer. But with the slider here, you can actually adjust how well you want it to play with other TCP traffic on your network. So you can see if you set it to 2, FileCatalyst will behave more like a regular TCP application. If you set it to 10, it will be more like a UDP accelerator where it will take up more bandwidth. But even at 10, our goal is still not to kill your other TCP connections. There's an option here for progressive. Progressive will let you do transfers of growing files. So imagine a file that is created on a disk and it's still growing, and you want to start transferring it instead of waiting the 2-3 hours for the completion of the growth file. So this is something you can enable as well here in the hot folder. MD5 checksum, you can verify your integrity here. As I mentioned, this is something that usually is a problem when you're just doing an SCP cron job. Here you can do an MD5 checksum. You can specify you want to do it on the fly, concurrent, or during transfer. You can keep file modification timestamps. So if a file was created X on the next date. That date will be recreated on the file system where we're uploading to. You can enable multi-client. Think of a multi-client if we're doing, let's say, a directory with 10,000 files in it, and you want to concurrently work on multiple files. So if you enable this and you set it to, let's say, 10, then it will be 10 files will be going concurrently to the server. The nice part is it speeds things up. Another thing, it makes everything much more dynamic on your folder, on your target folder, because things appear very quickly. And then you can also enable auto archiving of small files. So if you enable this, the idea is here that if you have 10,000 small files, let's say 100 KB files, it will take a really long time to transfer each file one by one, because you have to open a connection, transfer the file, and then tear it down. This takes time. If you're doing an archive type of when you're archiving small files, then you're just bundling them basically into one big tarball that is not compressed, and you're sending this tarball across the wire and then uncompressing them on the other end. And you can specify also the size of this tarball, so you don't have to wait for everything to get compressed. You can just work in sort of chunks. Like you can work with a smaller, let's say, make a tarball of 100 megs, transfer it, unzip it, move on to the next 100 meg tarball. So this gives you just much more dynamic transfers. Data minimization, as I mentioned, we have something called deltas or rsync. You can transfer different deltas. Is really meant for if you're doing a file transfer, that is, you've transferred the file, and then over the course of a day that file has changed, but it has not changed completely, it changed partially. So let's say maybe it grew by a bit, or maybe certain portions, regions of that file were changed. Then you can enable file deltas, and we can just do a calculated signature and send only the difference on the subsequent transfer. So this reduces the amount of data you got to push across the wire. And once again, here's this compression. Compression is really not the reason we accelerate things, but it's something we as well have for highly compressible files. For example, if you're sending log files, we can compress them for you on the fly. You don't have to first tar them, gzip them, and then transfer them. You can actually just point us to a directory and we'll do that all for you. File set. So think of a file set as the since you could have in your scheduler multiple tasks, you can make yourself one task for the very, very big files that take a really long time, and you can make yourself another task for the very small files. So you can point those tasks to the same folder. So imagine one task is doing the big files, and the other one is doing the small files. So you can access the small files very quickly without waiting for the big files to finish. So this is how you can do file set. There's a lot of other filter applications, but this is sort of the one that comes up right now. Another thing you might not want to transfer, let's say, is like files that end with like a dot something, the hidden files. You can also filter those out. Transfer cache is important if you transfer a folder and you want the hot folder to remember what it transferred last time. It will not transfer the files if you that were already sent when you have the transfer cache enabled. So it will remember by size, file name, and date modified, and if the file has not changed, it will skip it if this is enabled. Synchronization option, as I mentioned, to delete files and keep mirroring. And then you can do different post tasks, what to do with the transfers afterwards. Do you want to copy the files to a different folder? Do you want to delete them? Do you want to rename them? Do you want to send out email notifications that it was successful or failure? If you notice here, for example, if you're dealing with a very large volume of files, you might not want to check the send file list. Why? Because if you're sent, let's say, 500,000 files, it will crash your email, because the email will be so big that it will not be able to go through. So this is something that you can also enable, and this is something we thought of when we were designing this application. So this is the hot folder. Right now I'm not set on any schedule. I'm set for this task to do it manually. So if I just go to my activity here and I click on Start Transfer, you can see the transfer happening right now. And once again, if I go here in my, and you can see the file transfer going, you can see my current rate, my average rate, and effective rate, and it's transferring all these files. If you go back, we'll just go back quickly to the server, see what's going on the server. You can see here on the server, it's receiving the files. You can see the session here. I can see the same information I see on the hot folder, but from the server side. So it's very easy to debug errors because you always see the active sessions. You can see what's going on, and you can very easily pinpoint the problems. If you have any problems in a hot folder to find the errors, you have the entire log for the task. You can search for certain file names. Let's say I want to search for .pdf. It will show me all the lines where the .pdf exists. So right now it's sending files with temporary file names, as you can see, and storing these files. So you can see it's very easy to debug errors because everything is going through this log file. We do have another application called Central where you can actually connect all of this and then have a web application where you can see everything at a glance from all the hot folders, all the servers, search by file names, find out bottlenecks on your network. But that's a story for a totally different webinar. But I just wanted to show you here what you can do with the hot folder, which allows you very quickly to find problems and identify them, and also get notified if something goes wrong. So that's pretty much the presentation I wanted to say. Just a few more items I wanted to touch base on. When you're doing automation, keep in mind what are you transferring and where. If you're going from cross-platform, if you're going from Mac OS to Linux, for example, you'll be losing some attributes of the files. So here I just outlined all the different attributes for Mac, Windows, and Linux, and what you should expect to be losing if you're going from one platform to another platform. But at the end, maybe that's okay. If you're just doing archival and you don't care about these attributes, that might be just fine, but this is something that you need to consider when you're setting up an automation task. Do you need these attributes for between platforms? Just wanted to touch base more on the file system events. So think of a file system event as hot folder registers with the operating system, and ask the operating system to tell it every time it updates a file on the disk. Then hot folder takes this information, looks if there is a hot folder matching, a hot folder setup that matches that, and if it does, then it will automatically perform these actions. The plus side here is that you can instantly react on folders with millions of files. If you're working with millions of files, then scanning and deciding what to transfer will take a really long time. It might take 2-3 hours. If you are doing, however, file system events, this will be more instant. It will be instant because you're actually doing a transfer right away. The file system events has a bit of a limitation, and is that if you're doing map network drives, especially if you're just mapping network drives on Windows or via SMB, you will not get those file system events for the map network drives. Then the file system events will only come in for the local hard drives. However, if you're attaching to a network attached storage, it's an enterprise grade solution. Many vendors are in this space that provide you enterprise, network storage. Their drivers, when you're installing the driver, will usually do support file system events. So if you're just doing a plain Jane free Samba share and you want to do file system events, that will not work. If you're connecting to an enterprise grade storage solution, file system events will work. So it's just something you have to keep in mind. If you're not sure if it does or not, you can always contact us and we'll try to look it up. We usually try to stay on top of what works and what doesn't. But the test is also pretty quick. It's just a matter of trying the hot folder and see what happens. And then another thing, when you're enabling file system events, make sure the initial transfer without it on. So just transfer everything you need. This might take a day, two, whatever, how big the size is, and then turn it on once you know that two folders are in perfect sync. Another analogy here, you could almost like take the data and, if the data is really very big and will take months to transfer, you could transport this data physically, mount it, you have two perfect folders, and then enable file system events. So this is something else you can do. I'm pretty much done. I'm going to go through some questions. I just wanted to let everyone know what's in store for our events. So as I said, we just came back from Las Vegas. Next event will be in London in the UK, in England. We're going to be doing a user forum. Time and date is still to be announced, but it's going to be in around February 20th or 21st. Because afterwards we're going to be doing the BVE show in Excel in London. Afterwards we're going to be in March, mid-March, we're going to Dubai. We're doing a stand there. And then we have our big show at NAB, the NAB show 2015. We've got quite a nice booth set up this year with very interesting demos pertaining to media and entertainment. And that will be something very interesting to come by and see us at NAB this year. We have our monthly webinars, which you are listening to now. Thank you very much. And don't forget our email newsletter, a monthly newsletter called the Transfer Express, where we talk about issues about file transfer and features of our software. So thank you very much for attending. I will take some questions now, and let's get started.